Gerald Winters had enough food to feed the entire town, but his own children were dying of hunger in the room next door. 16-year-old Marcus pressed his ear against the dining room wall, listening to his father's knife scrape against fine china. His stomach twisted with hunger. Beside him, 14-year-old Alina lay motionless on the cold floor, too weak even to cry anymore. Through the crack under the door, Marcus could see his father's shadow, could smell roasted lamb and fresh bread. His hand trembled as it moved toward the forbidden door handle. If you want to see how far a father's greed can go and what finally breaks it, hit that subscribe button right now. You won't believe what happens next. And drop a comment telling me what you do in Marcus's situation. Marcus's fingers wrapped around the cold metal, but footsteps on the other side made him freeze. The door swung open violently, and Gerald Winters stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, his gray beard glistening with grease. Eavesdropping again, Gerald's voice was ice. Both of you to your room now. Marcus helped Alina to her feet. She swayed, her dark skin ashen, her lips cracked. They shuffled down the hallway of their father's mansion, past portraits of their mother, beautiful, kind-faced Sarah Winters, dead 3 years now. Everything had changed the day they buried her. The lock clicked behind them. Marcus laid Alina on the thin mattress they shared and stared out the barred window at the town below. The drought had turned everything brown. Women walked with empty water gourds balanced on their heads. Children sat listless in doorways. And in the distance, his father's warehouses stood like monuments to cruelty. "I'm going tonight," Marcus whispered. Alina's eyes fluttered open. "He'll catch you." "Then he catches me." Dawn hadn't broken when Marcus picked the lock with a bent wire, a skill his mother had taught him years ago when she'd still smiled, when she'd still called their father a good man. The memory stung as he crept through the silent house and out into the dusty streets. The warehouse loomed ahead, its wooden doors chained shut. Marcus scaled the wall, dropped through a high window, and landed in a sea of plenty. Mountains of grain sacks stretched before him, stamped with patterns of red and gold. Dried fish hung from rafters. Barrels of cooking oil lined the walls. Sacks of rice, millet, and cassava flour were stacked higher than his head. His father had enough food here to feed the entire region for months. Marcus stuffed his pockets with dried fruit and reached for a loaf of bread when a hand clamped down on his shoulder. "Thief!" Gerald dragged him through the streets by his ear, ignoring his struggles, ignoring the early morning merchants who turned away in shame. Back at the mansion, Gerald shoved him into the locked room where Alina waited. "No food today, or tomorrow. Maybe hunger will teach you what I learned as a boy: nothing in this world is free." The door slammed. Alina crawled to Marcus, touched his empty hands, and began to cry. 2 days later, Alina collapsed at the window. Her fever burned so hot that Marcus soaked their one blanket in the wash basin and draped it over her. She mumbled their mother's name, called for water that didn't come. Marcus pounded on the door until his fists bled. "She's dying, please." "Silence." He was preparing to break the door down when voices rose from below. Marcus pressed his face to the window and saw a stranger dismounting from the weekly trade caravan, a tall man in a worn traveling coat, carrying a leather medical bag. The town's record keeper, old Victoria Cross, approached the stranger. She was ancient, her hair white as clouds, her wrinkled face holding the wisdom of decades. She wore traditional beaded jewelry that clicked as she moved, and her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, studied the newcomer. "We don't get many doctors here," Victoria said, her voice carrying up to Marcus's window. "Dr. Thomas Reed, I go where I'm needed." He glanced around at the desperate faces, the thin children, the closed warehouses. "Seems I chose well." "There are sick children in the Winters mansion," Victoria said carefully, "but their father doesn't take kindly to visitors." Thomas's jaw tightened. "Then he'll have to make an exception." Marcus heard the commotion downstairs, his father's angry voice, Thomas's calm insistence. Victoria's surprising authority as she invoked old town laws about medical emergencies. Finally, footsteps thundered up the stairs. Thomas knelt beside Alina, checked her pulse, her eyes, her parched lips. His face darkened. "This child isn't sick, she's starving." Gerald stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "She's learning discipline." Thomas rose slowly, his voice deadly quiet. "I've seen discipline. This is cruelty. My house, my rules." "Then perhaps the town council needs to discuss your rules, especially regarding the community fund your late wife established." Something flickered in Gerald's eyes, fear, maybe, or calculation. "That fund is properly managed." "Is it?" Thomas stepped closer. "Because from where I stand, you're hoarding food during a drought while children starve. Makes a man wonder what else you might be hoarding." Gerald's hand moved to his belt, but Victoria appeared in the doorway. "Enough," she said softly. "Doctor, treat the girl. Gerald, we should talk privately." After they left, Thomas gave Alina water, a little at a time, and slipped Marcus a piece of dried meat from his bag. "Hide this. Eat it slowly." "Why are you helping us?" Marcus asked. "Because someone has to." Thomas paused at the door. "Your mother, what was she like?" Marcus's throat tightened. "Kind. She fed people. Before she died, she made father promise to continue her work with the orphan fund." "And has he?" The question hung in the air long after Thomas left. That evening, after their father had locked them in again, Marcus whispered to Alina, "We're going to survive this. I promise." "How?" Her voice was barely audible. "I don't know yet, but Mother didn't raise us to give up." Down in Victoria's record house, surrounded by ledgers and documents, Thomas learned the truth. The old woman spread papers across her desk, papers showing Sarah Winters's carefully planned community fund, designed to help orphans and provide emergency relief during droughts, papers showing Gerald's name as trustee, and papers showing systematic withdrawals, all going into Gerald's personal accounts. "He's been stealing from his dead wife's charity for 3 years, Victoria said, her beaded jewelry clicking as she moved. "That's why he keeps his own children half-starved and hidden. If people see them healthy and well-fed, they'll ask questions. They'll wonder why the trustee of a charity lives in luxury while the town suffers." Thomas stared at the evidence. "This is enough to have him arrested." "Not quite, he's clever. The withdrawals can be explained as administrative costs, emergency expenses. We need more." Victoria's eyes hardened. "But if he finds out we're investigating, he'll destroy everything, and possibly us." "Then we move carefully," Thomas said. "What happens next will shock you. Keep watching." That night Gerald dined alone in his vast dining room. Roasted lamb, fresh bread, imported wine. He'd earned this, he told himself. He'd grown up with nothing, sleeping in mud huts, scraping by on scraps. His father had beaten the fear of poverty into him. Now he had wealth, security, control. He cut into a piece of fish, dried fish from his warehouse, stored for over a year. It tasted off, slightly bitter, but Gerald refused to waste it. Waste was weakness. The first cramp hit him as he reached for his wine. The second doubled him over. By the third, he was on the floor, convulsing, his vision blurring. Upstairs, Marcus heard the crash. He'd picked the lock again. He was getting faster and crept downstairs with Alina leaning on his shoulder. They found their father sprawled on the imported carpet, gasping, his face gray. Alina grabbed Marcus's arm. "We should help him." Marcus stared at the man who'd starved them, beaten them, locked them away like animals. "Should we?" "Marcus, he left you to die, Alina. For 2 days you burned with fever and he didn't care." "I know," tears streamed down her face, "but we're not him, we can't be him." Marcus's fists clenched. "You always forgive too easily. And you hold grudges too long." Alina's voice was stronger now. "What would Mother say?" The memory hit him like a wave, his mother singing to them at night, her voice soft and melodic, an old lullaby in a language her grandmother had taught her. Mercy is not weakness, she'd say. It's the courage to be better than your pain. Marcus closed his eyes. Fine, but I'm taking his keys first. He grabbed the ring of keys from his father's belt, then ran for Dr. Thomas's lodging house. Thomas worked through the night, treating Gerald's poisoning from the spoiled fish. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who hoarded food, too cheap to throw away rotting provisions, had poisoned himself with his own greed. While Thomas worked, Marcus and Alina made a decision that would change everything. They opened the warehouses at midnight. The keys turned smoothly and the doors swung wide. Together, weak as they were, they dragged sacks of grain into the town square, barrels of oil, dried fish and fruits. They worked until their muscles screamed, until dawn painted the sky orange. When the first townspeople emerged from their homes, they found food piled high in the central square. Mountains of it, enough to feed everyone for months. Victoria appeared, her traditional robes flowing, her face knowing. She'd been watching from her window. This needs to be documented, legally. She wrote everything down in her careful script, had witnesses sign, made it official. By sunrise, half the town was gathering, weeping, thanking the children they'd thought were living in luxury. Gerald woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window, and Thomas sitting beside his bed. "You'll live," Thomas said, "unfortunately for you." Gerald tried to sit up, winced. "My warehouses." "Empty. Your children distributed everything." The color drained from Gerald's face. He staggered to the window, saw the celebration in the square below, saw his children, healthy, glowing, surrounded by grateful people. They had no right. They had every right. Victoria entered the room carrying her ledgers. "As do I." She spread the evidence across his bed. The embezzlement, the stolen charity funds, the systematic theft from orphans and widows, all documented, all witnessed, all legal. "The town council convenes in an hour," Victoria said. "You're finished, Gerald." The council met in the old community hall, its walls decorated with woven tapestries and carved wooden masks, remnants of traditions Gerald had always scorned as primitive. The elders sat in a semicircle, their faces grave. Victoria presented her evidence. The crowd murmured, then erupted in anger. Gerald stood before them, diminished, his empire of greed crumbling. "Everything you own will be liquidated to repay what you stole," the chief elder announced. "You'll be left with nothing." "Then I'll have nothing to lose," Gerald snarled. "You think you've won? I'll destroy you all." "Father, stop." Alina's voice cut through the chaos. She stood, Marcus beside her, and the hall fell silent. "We found something else in your safe," Alina said quietly. She held up a bundle of letters tied with ribbon. "Letters from Mother." Gerald's face went white. "She knew," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "She knew what you were becoming. She wrote these in her final months, instructions on how to protect the fund, protect us. You hid them." Alina's hands trembled as she unfolded one. She wrote, "If you're reading this, my love has failed to stop what I feared most, that Gerald's childhood wounds would devour the good man I married. Protect my children, protect the innocent, and if possible, save him from himself." The hall was silent, except for Alina's quiet crying. "She still believed in you," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "Even knowing what you'd become, she thought you could change." Gerald sank to his knees. For the first time in 3 years, tears cut tracks through the dust on his face. The chief elder looked at the children. "What would you have us do?" The crowd waited. Gerald waited. Alina looked at Marcus. He nodded slowly. "Let him work for his redemption," Alina said. "Not in prison, not in exile, here. As a laborer, let him earn his meals like everyone else. Let him rebuild what he destroyed." "And if he refuses?" the elder asked. "Then we'll know he's truly lost," Marcus said. "But we have to try for Mother." Gerald looked up at his children. These two souls he tried to break, who stood stronger than he'd ever been. His pride screamed to refuse, to rage, to blame everyone but himself. But he was so tired, so empty. "I'll work," he whispered. Comment below if you think he deserves this second chance. 6 months later, the drought broke. Rain fell in sheets, turning the dust to mud, filling the dried wells, bringing green shoots bursting from the earth. The town celebrated with drumming and dancing, traditional songs rising to the sky. In the community gardens, Gerald dug irrigation ditches alongside men he'd once exploited. His hands were calloused now, his expensive clothes replaced with simple work garments. He was thin, weathered, but his eyes were clearer than they'd been in years. Marcus and Alina ran the restored orphan fund from their mother's old office. The walls were decorated with her photographs, her journals, her dreams made real. They fed children, funded schools, did the work she'd envisioned. That evening, Gerald appeared at their door. Rain-soaked and hesitant. "I finished the southern garden," he said. "Thought you should know." Marcus studied his father's face, searching for deception, finding only exhaustion. "Come in," Alina said. "We made stew." Gerald hesitated. "I don't deserve." "No, you don't," Marcus said flatly. "But sit down anyway." They ate together for the first time in 3 years. The stew was simple, vegetables from the garden, grain from the community stores, seasoned with herbs Victoria had provided. Worth nothing in money, worth everything in what it represented. Gerald ate slowly, tasting each bite as if learning what food meant again. "The children at the orphanage," he said finally, "they need a new roof. I could help build it." Alina glanced at Marcus. He shrugged. "Talk to Victoria. She manages the projects now." "I will," Gerald paused. "Your mother, she would be proud of you both." "We know," Marcus said. "That's why we're doing this." They sat in silence as rain drummed on the roof. Not forgiven yet, forgiveness would take time if it came at all, but present, together, learning what it meant to be a family again. Victoria stopped by later, shaking rain from her traditional wrap, her beaded jewelry clicking. She smiled at the scene, 3 people sharing one simple meal. "I updated the records today," she told the children. "The fund is stronger than ever. Your mother's vision lives on." "Because of you," Alina said. "Thank you." "Because of all of us." Victoria's gaze moved to Gerald. "Even the broken can rebuild if they choose to." Gerald said nothing, but his hands trembled around his bowl. After Victoria left, after the meal was finished, Gerald stood to go. At the door, he turned back. "I don't know if I can be the man she wanted," he said quietly, "but I can try to be better than what I became." "That's all anyone can do," Alina said. Marcus walked his father to the door, watched him disappear into the rain. "Do you think he'll really change?" Alina asked. "I don't know," Marcus admitted, "but we gave him the chance. The rest is up to him." Outside, the rain fell soft and steady, washing away months of drought, feeding the earth, making things grow. In the community gardens, green shoots pushed through the soil, reaching for the light. Gerald walked through the rain to the small worker's cottage he now called home. It was nothing like his mansion. 1 room, a simple bed, a table and chair. But it was honest. It was earned. He lit a single candle and pulled out a photograph of Sarah he'd been allowed to keep. Her smile looked back at him, gentle and knowing. "I failed you," he whispered, "but they didn't fail, our children. They're stronger than both of us." The candle flickered. Outside, the rain sang against the roof. For the first time in 3 years, Gerald Winters slept without the weight of his gold, his warehouses, his cruelty pressing down on him. He slept like a man who'd been given something he didn't deserve but might, if he worked every day for the rest of his life, eventually earn. Sometimes the greatest fortune isn't what you keep, but what you're willing to give away. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And let me know in the comments, Have you ever had to choose between revenge and mercy?